My mother asked me if I was still a virgin at family dinner, and the way she said it made it very clear that there was only one safe answer, and it wasn't the truth. It wasn't even yes or no, it was whatever would keep the room from exploding and keep my body from being put on trial like it belonged to everyone but me. It started like every other family time Sunday, the kind you could smell from the hallway. Fried onions, cumin, cardamom, the low hum of my auntie's gossip mixing with my uncle's loud political debates, my grandmother STV blasting some nostalgic soap opera from back home that no one was watching, but no one would dare turn off. We live in the US, but inside our apartment, time stops somewhere around my parents' wedding day. I'm the oldest daughter, which in my family means I'm the third parent, unpaid housekeeper, counselor, and apparently the guardian of the family, as honor that hangs between my legs like an invisible bomb. I was already exhausted before anyone showed up. I'd been chopping vegetables since 8 a.m., cleaning bathrooms, laying out plates, making sure my younger siblings didn't set anything on fire. Mom moved around the kitchen like a general, barking orders, checking dishes, tucking away anything that looked too American. No crop tops, no ripped jeans, no English music playing. Remember, she hissed as she shoved a long sleeved dress into my hands. Family time, not your college friend's party. Put this on and tie your hair back. You look messy. I wanted to tell her my hair wasn't too messy. It was just curly like hers before she started ironing every part of herself that didn't fit the ideal. But I swallowed it, like I swallowed 1,000 things and went to change. Be useful, be quiet, be good. That is the unspoken rule. The men arrived first, of course, because men are always allowed to be early or late, loud or quiet, wrong or right. My father's booming voice filled the hallway before he even walked in, followed by two uncles, my teenage male cousins, and a sea of cologne. The women arrived after, carrying trays and bags, apologizing for being late even though they were right on time. My grandmother shuffled in last, grabbing my face in her soft, wrinkled hands and kissing my forehead like I was still 10. Mashallah, you're growing up, she said, loud enough for the whole room. Soon we'll have to find you a husband before the boys in this country ruin you. Everyone laughed. I smiled tightly and went back to the kitchen. Lunch was chaos in the way you can predict. The men at the dining table, the women on the couches or clustered around the coffee table, kids running everywhere, YouTube nasheeds playing on my dada's Bluetooth speaker. I moved between rooms with trays of food like a silent waiter, refilling plates, picking up dropped napkins, keeping my head down. My mom watched me from the corner of her eye, checking my posture, my tone, whether I smiled enough but not too much. Being perfect is a full-time job in families like mine. You're supposed to be invisible until they want to show you off. I thought I knew how today would go. They'd ask about school, about my grades, about whether I still remember my language, and they'd make jokes about no boyfriends, right? And I'd give the script answer and everyone would relax. We'd wash dishes until midnight, complain in whispers when the guests left, and then I'd go back to pretending to be normal at college on Monday. That's what I thought. I was wrong. It happened after dessert when the plates were mostly empty and the kids had migrated to the bedroom with their iPads. The room had that heavy after-eating quiet, the one where people start sinking into cushions, talking slower, sipping tea. I'd finally sat down on the edge of the couch, my feet throbbing, my back aching from standing all day when my mother announced in her hostess voice, "Let's have some family talk." My stomach knotted. Those words never lead anywhere good. The men went quiet. The women shifted slightly, eyes flicking to me, to my younger sister, to my cousins. My father cleared his throat. "Our girls are growing," he said, like we weren't sitting right there. "This country is dangerous. Temptations everywhere. We have to be more vigilant." The word vigilant hung in the air like a threat. Auntie Nadia, my mom's sister, nodded vigorously. When we were their age, our parents knew everything we did. These days, girls can disappear in the next room with their phones and God knows what they're doing. Everyone chuckled. My mother smiled tightly and turned to me, and I felt the world slow down, every sound stretching. "Actually," she said, "I wanted to ask something important." "And I want you." She looked around at the other women to hear her answer. Her gaze landed back on me, hard and bright. "Are you still a virgin?" For a second, I genuinely thought I'd misheard. The words were so blunt, so naked that my brain refused to process them. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. My little sister stopped chewing. One of my younger cousins giggled before his mother smacked his arm. The room went dead silent. She said it in our language, not in English. There's a word that sounds like a compliment but tastes like a condition. The kind of word that says whispered proudly about brides and cried over when lost. It's not just about sex. It says about obedience, about being untouched, unspoiled, unexperienced, a blank canvas to be handed to a man like a wrapped gift. "Umi," I started, my face on fire. "Please don't answer the question," my father said, his voice suddenly like a closed door. "We are family. There is no shame between us, only honesty." That line is such a joke because everything in our house is built on shame. Shame if you wear the wrong thing. Shame if you laugh too loud. Shame if you're seen talking to a boy. Shame if you're too quiet, too ambitious, too soft, too hard. But now, shame had a spotlight. and it was on me. My mom leaned forward, eyes gleaming with something I couldn't name. These days, she said, girls do things behind their parents' backs. Then they get married and shame all of us. I need to know. You've been in college, you stay on campus some nights, you have male classmates? She let the word hang like an accusation. Are you still pure? Pure. Like my body was water from a well and she was checking if someone had thrown dirt into it. Auntie Nadia murmured, it's better for her to be honest now than for her future husband to find out later. My grandmother shook her head sadly as if preemptively mourning something. My cousins stared at their plates. My brother, of course, looked wildly entertained. Here's the thing, I could have lied. It would have been easy. A simple yes, of course, delivered with the right mixture of indignation and innocence, and the conversation would have moved on. Maybe there'd be a lecture, maybe some dramatic vows about keeping it that way until marriage, but the performance would be over. Curtain closed. And a year ago, I probably would be done exactly that. But a year ago, I didn't know what I know now. A year ago, I hadn't met people who told me, your body is yours. A year ago, I hadn't sat in a campus support group and listened to other girls from families like mine talk about forced virginity tests, about mothers marching them to doctors to make sure, about nights spent crying in bathrooms because their worth was being measured by something no one can actually see. I hadn't read about consent and bodily autonomy and coercive control disguised as culture. I hadn't started writing in a journal every night, listing every time my parents made me feel like inventory instead of a daughter. A year ago, I thought this was normal. Now I knew it was abuse wrapped in tradition. So when my mother asked that question, something in me snapped. Not a dramatic, movie-style snap where I stood up and delivered some perfect speech, but a quieter, scarier snap where my survival instincts and my newfound rage collided. Why? I asked. My voice came out small at first, but my heart was pounding loud enough to shake the table. My mother blinked, not expecting that answer. What do you mean? Why? Why do you need to know? I pushed, my fingers digging into the edge of my chair. What difference would it make? If I say yes, you'll be satisfied for 5 minutes and still police everything I do. If I say no, you'll act like I killed someone. What exactly are you planning to do with this information? There it was. The question under the question. My father S. jaw clenched. My mother S. hand tightened around her teacup. We are your parents, she said. We have the right to know what kind of girl we are raising. Do you ask him that? I said, pointing at my brother. He almost choked on his drink. The room rustled. Do you sit him down in front of the whole family and ask if he's still a virgin? Do you talk about his body like it's his community property? Don't be disrespectful, my father snapped, but it sounded less like thunder and more like a crack of doubt. It is not the same for boys, my grandmother muttered, almost to herself. They don't get harmed the same way. So it is different, I said. So, it's not about God or morals, it is about controlling us. My aunt gasped. Astagfirullah, who taught you to talk like this? Therapy, I almost said. Books. Girls like me who are tired of being treated like walking honor badges. But I bit my tongue. Saying therapy in that room would be like detonating a nuclear bomb. Mental health is for crazy people in their vocabulary, and they like to believe we don't have those. My mother's eyes sharpened. You still haven't answered the question, she said. Everyone here is listening. We all want to hear your answer. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about curiosity or concern. This was a test, a public trial. She wasn't asking if I was still a virgin. She was asking if I was still their obedient daughter, if I had to play my assigned role, if I had to sacrifice my dignity on the altar of family honor one more time. And as much as my veins buzzed with anger, as much as my new self wanted to scream, my old self, the one who still lived under their roof, still needed their financial help for school, still shared a last name with them, knew the game wasn't over yet. I couldn't win this by blowing up in their faces. Not today. So, I did something different. I smiled. Not a sweet smile, not a grateful one, a tight, tired smile. My virginity, I said carefully, is between me and God, not me and this table. You could hear a pin drop. My mother S face went through a full slideshow of emotions in 3 seconds. Shock, rage, fear, calculation. My father opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. This is exactly what I mean, he said finally, turning to the others as if I weren't there. This country ruins girls. They think they are independent. They think they don't need guidance. Guidance is one thing, I said before I could stop myself. Interrogation is another. My mother slammed her cup down so hard some tea spilled onto the tablecloth. Enough, she snapped. You see? This is what happens when girls think they have privacy. Secret phones, secret apps, secret boyfriends. She can even say a simple yes or no. Because it is to none of your business, I said, the words slipping out like they'd been waiting all my life. My brother let out a low whistle under his breath. My aunt hissed his name. My grandmother shook her head again, her eyes shiny now. I told you, she muttered to my mother. This is what happens when you let them go to these schools. They fill their heads with nonsense. Nonsense like my body belongs to me? I said. Nonsense like girls and boys being held to the same standard? My father pointed a finger at me, his voice rising. You will lower your tone, he said. You are embarrassing us in front of the family. You're the one asking about my sex life in front of the family, I shot back before I could swallow it. Who is embarrassing who? My mother's face went white and then red. Ya Allah, she whispered. She has already ruined. That word sliced through me. Ruined. Like I was a piece of meat that had fallen on the floor. Like my value was measured in invisible marks on my body that she'd never see, but somehow felt entitled to judge. My little sister stared at me like she was watching her own future unfold at double speed. That S when my aunt spoke up. Not the loud one, not the gossip queen, but my quiet Aunt Samira, the one who always brought extra dessert just in case, the one who slipped me 20 once for emergencies and told me to keep it secret. Maybe, she said slowly. We shouldn't talk about this at the dinner table. Everyone turned to her, surprised. She rarely spoke during these power plays. My mom shot her a sharp look. You have daughters, she said. Don't you want to know? Aunt Samira's jaw tensed. I want them to know they can trust me, she said. That is not the same thing. For a second, I felt a flicker of hope. An adult, a married woman actually defending me even a little was a crack in the wall I'd never seen before. My father waved her off. We're not saying she has to give us details, he said. Just the truth. A simple question. Are you still... If you finish that sentence, I am leaving, I said, my voice shaking now more from adrenaline than fear. And I want to come back. There it was. The nuclear option. The one line you don't throw around lightly in families where leaving is the greatest betrayal, worse than anything you could do with another person in a bedroom. The room held its breath. My grandmother clutched her necklace. Astaghfirullah, she whispered, like I'd invoked a demon. My mother laughed, but it was a high, brittle sound. Where will you go? She scoffed. To your little American friends? To a boyfriend's house? She spit the last word like poison. That hurt because I do have a boyfriend. A kind, soft-spoken guy from my psychology class who doesn't touch me unless I say yes. Who knows more about my traumas than my own family? But he doesn't have a house. He has a dorm room that barely fits his bed and a mini fridge, and we both know that moving in together is a fantasy at this point. Where would I go? I didn't have an answer. And my mother knew it. That was the worst part. She felt so secure in her power over me that she could humiliate me publicly, confident that no matter how hurt or humiliated I was, I had nowhere else to go. Everyone watched me like they were watching a bomb tick down. I could feel the forked path in front of me. Back down, apologize, give them some watered-down version of what they wanted, or double down and risk losing everything, my home, my family, their money for school, the roof over my siblings' heads staying stable. Survival spoke louder. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to steady. I am not answering that question, I said quietly. Not now, not ever, and if you really cared about me, you wouldn't be asking it like this. My mother's eyes filled with tears so fast it almost shocked me. She wasn't a crier, at least not in front of other people. After everything we've done for you, she said, letting the tears fall, this is how you speak to your mother? I carried you for 9 months. I fed you. I sacrificed my life for you. And you can't even give me the respect of a simple answer? The guilt crept in like smoke. That is the thing about emotional manipulation. You can see the strings and still feel trapped by them. I wanted to say, respect goes both ways, but my tongue felt heavy. My father put his arm around her dramatically. Enough, he declared. She has clearly been poisoned by this culture. I knew letting her stay on campus was a mistake. He looked at me with something colder than anger, disappointment. From now on, no more staying overnight. You come home every day after class. We'll see who your real friends are then. The room buzzed with murmurs. My brother smirked. My little sister-ass eyes filled with tears. My cousins looked anywhere but at me. You can do that, I blurted. I have late labs, group projects. Then you drop them, he said, or change your schedule. If you want our support, you live by our rules. There it was. The transaction laid out in plain language. Their money, their conditions. My body, their jurisdiction. My future, their chessboard. The walls suddenly felt closer. My chest felt tight. I could feel a panic attack knocking on the door of my ribs, begging to be let in. I got up from the table. Where are you going? My mother demanded. To breathe, I said, before I say something I can take back. I walked to the bathroom on shaky legs, ignoring the whispers behind me. I locked the door and slid down to the floor, my dress bunching around my knees. For a minute, I just sat there, focusing on breathing in and out, counting tiles on the wall, listening to the muffled voices outside. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out with numb fingers. It was a message from Lena, a girl from campus whose number ID gotten from a flyer in the Women's Center. Support group for daughters from controlling families. Confidential. No judgment. I'd gone once, sat in the back, listened to girls telling stories that sounded uncomfortably like my own. I hadn't said much, but I'd given my number when they passed the list around. Now she'd texted, randomly, or maybe not so randomly. Hey, just checking in, the message read. Haven't seen you in a few weeks. You doing okay? I stared at the screen. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I thought about ignoring it, about sending a generic, yeah, busy with exams lie. Instead, I typed, my mother just asked me if I was still a virgin in front of my entire family. My dad just threatened to lock me down at home. I don't know what to do. My thumb shook as I hit send. The 3 dots appeared almost immediately. So sorry, she replied. That's not okay. Do you want to talk? My eyes burned. Another message followed. Remember what we said in group. You are allowed to have boundaries. Their shame is not your burden. Their shame is not your burden. I repeated it in my head like a spell. But spells don't pay rent. They don't change locks. They don't stop parents from turning your life into a cage if you step too far out of line. I can't afford to make them too angry, I wrote back. I still live here. Then we make a plan, she replied. Not today. Not all at once. Step by step. You don't have to answer their questions to survive this, and you don't have to do it alone. I stared at that last part. You don't have to do it alone. In the other room, my family was probably rewriting the story already. I was disrespectful. I'd yelled at my mother. I'd refused a simple, reasonable question. They'd leave out the part where my dignity was stripped in front of everyone. They'd leave out how small I felt. That's how it always goes. They commit the wound, then act shocked when you bleed. I took a deep breath and opened my notes app. If they were going to start rewriting my story tonight, I wanted my version written down somewhere they couldn't touch. I typed, tonight, my mother asked me if I was still a virgin at family dinner. This is what happened next. I poured it all out in frantic thumbs, the question, the silence, the lectures, the threats. I wrote about my grandmother as sadness, my aunt as small act of bravery, my brother as smirk. I wrote about feeling trapped and furious at the same time. I wrote about the way my mother's eyes gleamed, like she was both afraid of my answer and desperate to expose me. I wrote until my fingers ached. And as I wrote, a thought crept in, quiet but insistent. What if I didn't just write this for myself? What if other girls needed to hear it too? Not now, not while I was still sleeping in the room down the hall from the people who'd just put me on trial. But someday, maybe in a video, anonymous at first, my face blurred or cropped out, my voice telling the world, this is what it's like. This is what they do. This is why we stay, and this is how we leave. The bathroom door shook lightly. My mother Yisrael's voice came through, deceptively soft. Come out, she said. We need to finish this conversation. My heart lurched. The conversation? As if there was anything left to say, as if she hadn't already declared me ruined in her mind. I looked at my reflection in the mirror, a girl with red eyes, hair frizzing out of its bun, jaw clenched. I didn't look like a disobedient daughter or a fallen woman or whatever other dramatic label they wanted to slap on me. I just looked tired. So tired. 1 minute, I called out. I'll be right there. I wiped my face, fixed my hair, and pocketed my phone. As I unlocked the door, I knew 2 things for sure. I couldn't give them what they wanted tonight, and I couldn't survive many more nights like this. Something had to change. I just didn't know yet if the change would come quietly, secretly, like a girl slipping out a window with a backpack, or loudly, publicly, like a confession broadcast to the world. All I knew was that this dinner, this question, this humiliation was not the end of the story. It was the beginning. And as I stepped back into the living room, every eye on me again, my mother opening her mouth to resume the interrogation, I felt that snap again, not breaking this time, but solidifying, like a bone setting itself. Sit, my father ordered. I sat. For now, but in my mind, the first words of my story were already out in the world. My mother asked me if I was still a virgin at family dinner, I thought, as I lifted my chin just a little higher. And that S when everything started to change. The room felt different the moment I sat back down, like the air had shifted and everyone could feel the invisible line I had just drawn, even though no one knew exactly where it was yet, and my mother was staring at me the way people look at something broken. They were trying to decide if it can be fixed or if it's better to throw away. And my father's hand was still wrapped around her shoulder like he needed to physically hold the situation in place before it could fall apart. And all I could hear was the faint clink of teaspoons hitting glass and the sound of my own heartbeat thudding in my throat like a warning drum, because I knew the next words that came out of anyone's mouth were going to change everything, whether I was ready for it or not. And my mother finally spoke again. But now her voice had that syrupy sweetness that always made my skin crawl, the one she used when she was trying to look calm for an audience while expressing something much darker underneath. And she said, We are only asking because we love you and we want what is best for you. And if I hadn't spent my entire life being translated into something small by that exact sentence, I might have actually believed her because from the outside, it always sounded so reasonable, so caring, so normal, but I could see the other meaning woven through it, like a second language only daughters in families like mine ever truly learn. And that meaning said, we are scared of losing control of you, and we will do whatever it takes to get it back. And she continued, leaning forward toward me now, lowering her voice as if intimacy could make this less humiliating. You don't understand the danger you are in as a girl in this world. People don't respect women who don't respect themselves. We're trying to protect you from becoming that kind of girl, and that phrase, that kind of girl, hung in the air like a curse, like a category that I could already feel them sliding me into, and I realized with a strange clarity that it didn't actually matter whether I was or wasn't a virgin. It didn't matter what I had done or not done, because in that moment they had already decided I was suspicious. I was contaminated by independence, and once a family like mine decided that about you, the facts stopped mattering. All that mattered was how tightly they could reel you back in before anyone else noticed the rebellion taking root, and I looked around the room at my aunts and uncles and cousins, people who had watched me grow up, who had watched me carry babies on my hips and pour tea for elders and recite prayers in a straight line, and none of that mattered now, not really, because one question had torn all of that apart and left me sitting there like a stranger in my own home, and my little sister shifted beside me on the couch, and I could feel her eyes burning into the side of my face. And I knew she wasn't looking at me with judgment. She was looking at me like I was doing something she had only ever imagined in secret, like she was both terrified for me and proud of me at the same time. And that look almost undid me more than anything else because she was still so young, still so trapped, and I suddenly realized that everything I did from this moment on, every word, every choice wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the way she would understand her own future too, and my father cleared his throat again, the same warning sound he'd made my entire childhood right before delivering a lecture or a punishment. And now he said, "We have been very patient with you. You are starting to forget where you come from. You are starting to think you are above this family, above our values. We need to correct that." And the word correct settled deep into my stomach like a stone, because correction in our house had never meant a conversation. It meant restriction, isolation, control, and sometimes pain. Not always physical, but always psychological, the kind that sticks around long after bruises fade. And my Aunt Nadia leaned in eagerly like she'd been waiting for this moment, saying, "You know, she's at the perfect age to start thinking about marriage. Maybe that's the problem. A girl without direction starts getting ideas, and suddenly the picture they were painting began to form clearly in front of me, like a horrible puzzle finally snapping together. This wasn't just about whether I was a virgin. This was about whether I had become too difficult, too independent, too full of questions. And in their world, the easiest way to solve that wasn't to talk to me. It was to hand me over to someone who would replace my father's authority with his own. And my mouth went dry as that realization washed over me, because I had heard these conversations in whispers about other girls, cousins of cousins, friends from the community who suddenly got engaged at 19 or 20 to men they barely knew. Very convenient matches arranged in urgent time frames, and everyone had always said, "Mashallah, she's such a good girl," but the truth underneath had always been that she had become too loud, too curious, too rebellious, and marriage was the silencing solution. And my mother's eyes softened in a way that almost looked kind now. "Maybe it's time we start thinking of the next step for you," she said gently, as if she was talking about signing me up for a class. "Your cousin S. family has a son. Good job, good reputation, and they have already asked about you once before," and my heart slammed so hard against my ribs I swore everyone could hear it. And there it was, the real reason for the question, the real reason for the performance, the shifting voices, the audience of relatives, the emotional pressure. They hadn't asked me if I was still a virgin just to satisfy their curiosity. They had asked because they were mentally preparing me for a transaction. They were checking the condition of the product before discussing the deal, and I felt something in me snap again, but this time it wasn't a fear. It was pure, burning anger, the kind that starts in your stomach and shoots up into your throat and your hands, and before I even realized what I was doing, the words were already out. "You were talking about me like I am not sitting right here," I said, my voice shaking, but loud enough that everyone froze. "You were talking about my life like I am an object you're negotiating over," and my father's face went dark instantly. "Lower your voice," he barked. "You will not speak like that in this house." And for a split second, the old panic flared in my chest, that automatic fear of being punished, of being trapped, of being reminded who had the power. But then I looked down at my hands and saw that they weren't even shaking anymore, and that realization gave me a strange kind of courage. And I said, "Then maybe it's not a house anymore. Maybe it's a cage," and the room erupted, voices overlapping, my mom gasping my name like I'd just committed a crime, my aunts talking at the same time, my grandmother wailing softly like she did at funerals, and I stood up without even thinking, the couch scraping loudly across the floor behind me, and I couldn't tell if I was about to faint or fly, but I knew if I didn't speak now, I would never speak at all. You asked me if I was still a virgin, but not because you care about me, I said, my voice louder now, clearer. You asked because you want to hand me off like a package. Because you were scared that I might make my own choices. Because a daughter with a mind is more dangerous to you than any stranger could ever be, and the shock on their faces was almost unreal, like they were watching someone else. Not the quiet, obedient oldest daughter they thought they owned. And my mother started to cry for real this time, deep sobs pushing through her chest as she pressed her hands to her face, saying, "How did we raise such an ungrateful child?" Over and over, like a prayer, and I felt a familiar pang of guilt stab through me because even in moments like this, some twisted part of me still wanted to run over and hug her, still wanted her approval, still wanted her to look at me the way she used to when she braided my hair and told me I was her little star. But I also knew that version of her had always been tied to a condition, to my obedience, to my silence, and I was done with that bargain, even if it broke me in the process. And my father stood up too now, towering over me, his face filled with fury and betrayal. "If you walk out that door," he said slowly, each word heavy, "you are no longer our daughter." And I looked at him, at the man who had once carried me on his shoulders, who had once taught me how to ride a bike, who had once kissed my forehead before school every morning, and all I could see now was a judge ready to erase me over a question that should have never been asked. And the strangest thing was that, instead of terror, I felt calm, because in that moment he had said out loud what I'd been quietly afraid of for years, that my worth in their eyes was conditional, revocable, dependent on how well I fit into the story they wanted to tell about me. And I realized something else too, if that was the case. If their love could be switched off so easily, then it wasn't actually love. And that truth hurt more than anything else, but it also freed me in a way I'd never experienced before. And I whispered, almost to myself, "Maybe I was never your daughter to begin with. Maybe I was just a role you assigned to me." And the room went dead silent again. Even the kids in the other room had stopped making noise, as if the whole apartment was holding its breath. And my father pointed toward the hallway. "Go to your room and stay there," he said. "We will discuss what to do with you later." And I knew that what to do with you could mean 1,000 different punishments, most of them designed to break me down until I apologized and crawled back into the version of myself they found acceptable. And for the first time in my life, something in me refused, completely and absolutely. So instead of walking toward my bedroom, I turned toward the front door, and every nerve in my body lit up as I heard the women gasp and my mother cry out my name. And my hand hovered over the handle for one long, terrifying second, because I wasn't just opening a door, I was stepping into the unknown, into uncertainty, into a world where I would have no family safety net, no guaranteed roof, no protection, except the one I built for myself. And I thought of my sister's set eyes on me, full of fear and hope, and that was enough. So I pulled the door open and stepped out into the hallway, the apartment door slamming shut behind me with a final, echoing sound that made my heart twist painfully in my chest. And I stood there for a moment, listening to the muffled chaos inside, the sound of my old life unraveling on the other side of a cheap wooden frame. And then I started walking down the stairs, out into the cool evening air, my heart racing, my mind spiraling, my whole body trembling with the weight of what I had just done. And when my phone buzzed in my hand, I almost didn't look at it, because I knew it could be my mother, my father, my aunt, someone demanding that I come back and undo it all. But instead it was Lena again, my screen lighting up with just 3 words that somehow felt like a lifeline in the middle of a storm. "Where are you?" And for the first time ever, instead of lying, instead of minimizing, instead of pretending everything was fine, I typed back exactly what was true. I just left my house. I don't think I can go back. And as I stared at the message hanging there, sent into the digital void, I realized that my mother-esque question at that dinner table hadn't just exposed some hidden part of me. It had exposed the lie that had been holding my entire life together. And now that the lie was cracked open, there was no putting it back the way it was, no matter how much they begged or threatened or cried. And as the night air wrapped around me and the noise of traffic hummed in the distance like a new, unfamiliar song, a terrifying, electric thought settled into my chest and refused to leave. I had just chosen myself, and there was no going back.